when estimation replaced certainty. For a long time, knowing meant being sure. An answer was either right or wrong. Then certainty quietly stepped aside. To understand how estimation replaced certainty, we have to return to a moment when exact answers were expected. Early mathematics prized precision. Lengths were measured. Totals were counted. Proofs ended with finality. Knowledge felt complete. The satisfaction of arriving at a definitive answer was not merely intellectual. It was emotional. It provided a sense of closure that allowed the mind to move on to the next question with confidence. This mattered because certainty created trust. Decisions rested on firm conclusions. Errors were visible. Disagreement had boundaries. To know something meant it could be settled. But as problems grew larger and more complex, exactness became fragile. Measurements could not be perfect. Every instrument introduced its own margin of error. Every observation was influenced by conditions that could not be fully controlled. The ideal of perfect measurement, which had seemed attainable in principle, proved unreachable in practice. Systems changed faster than they could be captured. Reality refused to stay still long enough for certainty to hold. The systems being studied were dynamic, interconnected, and sensitive to conditions that could not be fully specified. The dream of capturing the world in exact equations gave way to the recognition that the world resists such capture. Estimation entered as a compromise. It was not celebrated as a breakthrough, but accepted as a practical necessity, a way of continuing to make progress when the ideal of exactness proved unattainable in the face of real-world complexity. Not because precision failed, but because it became impractical. Approximations worked where exact answers stalled. Ranges replaced points. Instead of a single definitive answer, estimation offers a span of possibilities bounded by degrees of confidence. The answer was no longer a number. It was a region within which the truth was expected to lie. Confidence became probabilistic instead of absolute. At first, this felt temporary. A shortcut until better tools arrived. But the tools improved, and certainty did not return. The more accurately systems were measured, the more complexity was revealed. Precision uncovered uncertainty instead of eliminating it. Each new layer of measurement revealed further variation, further complexity, and further questions that could not be resolved with the tools available. The pursuit of exactness led, paradoxically, to a deeper appreciation of how much remained unknown. This was a turning point. Knowing no longer meant being sure. It meant being close enough to act. Estimation did not weaken knowledge. It redefined it. What had once been considered inferior knowledge, knowledge that acknowledged its own limitations, was revealed to be a more honest and ultimately more useful form of understanding than the false precision it replaced. And once that redefinition took hold, certainty stopped being the goal. As estimation spread, thinking adapted to living without final answers. Decisions were made with margins of error. Models spoke in ranges. Outcomes were framed as likely instead of certain. This felt unsettling at first. Certainty had offered closure. Estimation offered only confidence levels. But it also allowed progress where certainty could not. Complex systems could now be navigated instead of solved. This mattered because estimation changed responsibility. When answers were exact, mistakes felt like failures. When answers were estimated, mistakes became expected. Error was no longer a flaw. It was part of the process. The recognition that all measurement includes uncertainty, and that all conclusions drawn from measurement inherit that uncertainty, transformed error from a sign of failure into an expected and manageable feature of inquiry. Over time, people stopped waiting for perfect information. Action moved earlier. Planning became iterative. Knowledge became provisional. Truth was no longer a destination, but an interval. The concept of a fixed, final answer gave way to the understanding that knowledge exists within a range, bounded by the limitations of measurement and the inherent variability of the phenomena being studied. But something subtle was lost. Without certainty, conclusions felt softer, commitments felt conditional. Disagreement became harder to resolve because no answer could claim final authority. Estimation made thinking flexible, but also restless. The mind, accustomed to satisfaction of definitive conclusions, found itself in a permanent state of revision, always updating, always adjusting, never quite arriving at the sense of completion it craved. The conflict emerged quietly. Systems gained speed and adaptability, but people felt less grounded. Decisions were justified as reasonable rather than correct. Outcomes were defended as within expectation rather than right. Estimation did not remove truth. It loosened it, and once loosened, truth stopped feeling solid underfoot. The conflict reached its peak when estimation began replacing conviction. Decisions were made without ever settling questions. Policies shifted constantly. Conclusions were updated, revised, and retracted. The pace of revision accelerated as data accumulated faster and methods grew more sophisticated, creating the impression that knowledge was becoming less stable even as it was actually becoming more accurate. Nothing felt finished. This is the emotional breaking point. People began craving certainty again, even false certainty, because estimation never offered closure. Living inside ranges felt exhausting. Confidence without finality bred anxiety. Mathematically, nothing was wrong. Estimation was doing exactly what it was meant to do. It reflected a world that changed, resisted precision, and punished rigidity. But human psychology struggled with permanent provisionality. This tension reshaped trust. Experts spoke in probabilities. Audiences heard hesitation. What was meant as honesty felt like doubt. Certainty, even when unfounded, sounded more reassuring than careful estimation. The deeper issue was expectation. Estimation was treated as a temporary phase, not a permanent condition. People waited for certainty to return. It never did. The expectation that estimation was a temporary phase, a bridge between the old certainty and a new, more sophisticated certainty, persisted for generations before it was finally recognized as a misunderstanding of the nature of knowledge itself. The conflict was no longer between right and wrong. It was between stability and honesty, between answers that felt firm and answers that admitted their limits. And in that gap, trust began to wobble, because uncertainty, when continuous, feels less like insight and more like erosion. The resolution begins when estimation is no longer treated as a weakness, but as a form of maturity. Certainty was never lost. It was revealed to be conditional all along. Estimation simply made that condition visible. This changes how knowledge is held. Confidence comes from understanding limits, not denying them. Decisions are made with humility instead of finality. Revision becomes strength, not failure. The deeper lesson is acceptance. A changing world cannot be captured by fixed answers. Estimation does not mean ignorance. It means alignment with reality as it is, not as we wish it to be. When certainty ruled, knowledge felt solid but brittle. When estimation arrived, knowledge felt unstable but alive. The challenge is learning to live with that motion. Estimation did not replace truth. It replaced the illusion that truth could ever be finished. And in doing so, it liberated inquiry from the impossible standard of completeness and redirected it toward the more achievable and ultimately more valuable goal of progressive understanding. So what do you think? Did losing certainty make thinking weaker or finally honest?